So, speaking of our Western version of shithole countries, have you heard what's happening in France?
Oh, yeah. I love the French spirit of protest. It's just so interesting how when it's certain people protesting, all of a sudden, now they realize that civil disobedience is bad.
Yeah. Honestly, if there's one people who know how to bring about a revolution, it's probably the French. They've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, they just don't like when black people do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you gotta be white.
Welcome, everybody, to the Planet Policy Pals podcast. I'm Ala, one of the co-hosts.
And I'm Audra, also a co-host.
Yay. We haven't done this in a while, just in case someone new is listening to the show. This is the podcast where friends discuss environmental policy, science, community, and just shit about the planet. We don't shit on the planet. This is shit about the planet.
I mean, technically, you also shit on the planet.
We do. Please rate and review us, guys. I will never stop asking. You guys, all you have to do is actually rate us, review us, and then maybe I'll ask less. Who knows?
Yeah, it's not going to stop, guys. Just do it, please. Well, last week we talked about the US and its great relationship with oil.
And accidents.
Right? Check it out because we never miss an opportunity to shit on the great countries, especially the great United States of America. Not Ala, though.
I keep telling you to support the Stars and Stripes or respect them or whatever, okay?
Oh, yeah, guys. Go back and listen to that episode. Maybe you can make a drinking game out of how many times she said, respect the stripes and the stars.
Anyway, hey, you guys, we got our first sort of questions, sort of interaction. We love when you guys comment. Leave us comments. We love them. We'll always respond, except it's another one telling us that global warming is a hoax or we're stupid. I swear to God, please stop, okay? But someone on TikTok asked us what we thought about the news on the F-150 Lightning emissions impact. If you don't know this, episode 51 was about EVs. And we talked about different things regarding EVs and greenwashing and things like that. So someone commented on our TikTok, thank you, Engineering Perspective. That is their name.
Pretty cool name.
I know. He designs electric vehicles. So he shared this New York Times article with us about the F-150 Lightning truck and emissions. And I love the truck personally. You know this, Audra. I tell you how much I want that truck.
Yes, that's why she lives in Texas.
Yes, baby, everything's big in Texas. But there is the issue of whether these bigger electric vehicles are still good for the planet. At the end of the day, larger things do take up more power, I guess. And we do have SUVs in almost every brand, including Tesla, which Engineering Perspective is a fan of. That being said, what do you think, Audra? Because I did send you the article. Do you think people who love trucks and the planet, people like me, can buy these sort of vehicles as an alternative when we want to ride high on top of the world? Or is it just another greenwashing thing?
I mean, buying a Prius is still going to be better. So, I can see the point being made here. Because, I guess in the whole life cycle analysis, it is still worse buying a truck than it is a smaller vehicle. But while that is the case, even if we do move to a net zero, and while that is the case, even if we do move to a net zero emission scenario within our production cycles and, in a utopian world, I still think that discarding the vehicle as waste would still require more energy. So I guess in the whole conversation of energy, it does take a lot more. But it is still great for SUVs to have this option because it brings people like you towards electric as well.
Right.
And it's helping a lot more people to shift to electric. So I wouldn't call it greenwashing. It is pretty legitimate in my opinion because it is still, an electric SUV is still better than a smaller gas emitting vehicle.
There you have it, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we can go out there and we can still be American and drive our sort of giant cars. That brings us to today's topic, which really has nothing to do with the news, but still. We're going to be talking about land. We need land. We live on land, and rent is through the roof. So honestly, we need to do something, y'all. Although I feel like that's more due to greed than scarcity, but that's not what this episode is about. In countries with really high rates of, economic and urban population and growth, the price of land is rising faster than our incomes. Case in point, here, the US. A lot of people argue that this isn't a real problem, and what we see is actually the appearance of land scarcity. Normally, I wouldn't even include this kind of nonsense in our episode, but I just thought that was interesting that people actually think that this is just the appearance of land because we're overpopulated. But no, there's a real scarcity of, when we think of land, it's not just like flat area, the things that we need there, vegetation, different ecosystems, stuff like that. During the 1980s to the 2000 period, more than half of the new agricultural land across the tropical areas came at the expense of what used to be intact forests. And another 28% came from, forests we were already disturbing because, human beings. And we're going to get there, but it's worth mentioning that sub-Saharan Africa is the one region where deforestation is not primarily due to urban development. In fact, Latin America and sub-Saharan Africa seem to be where we still have enough land left for human consumption. And boy, are we taking advantage of that.
So clearly we're destroying land. I'm pretty sure that does something to the air and the whole thing behind climate change, right?
Yeah, of course it does. Because even though a lot of this is driven by urban development and agriculture, it's also driven by extreme weather, right? And so there's a lot of significant threats associated with the loss of land that most people don't think about as being directly connected. It's more than just us losing housing and agricultural space.
Yeah, so I guess Bolsonaro wasn't exactly wrong for burning some of it, because apparently most of it is going away anyway.
Oh, man, I hate that man so much. Anyway, hate is a strong word because I don't think about him that much, but when I do, he annoys me. But yeah, deforestation and the degradation of tropical forests actually contribute about 10% of our global GHGs.
Oh, wow. That's a big percentage for just one thing.
Exactly. Like our added GHGs from human beings. And so we've lost 35% of forests in the last 300 years. What we have left, 82%, have been compromised by human activity. So we really do kind of need it. And the way it works really is that the forest is a carbon sink. In fact, it is our largest terrestrial carbon sink. And so when we lose organic soil carbon, it's usually a good way for us to measure how much land is degrading, because 2/3 of all the carbon stores from soils and vegetation have been lost since the 19th century, just due to our degradation. And what I mean by desertification, deforestation, urbanization, all that stuff. When we degrade the land like that, that carbon gets released into the atmosphere, along with nitrous oxide, which makes land degradation one of the biggest contributors to climate change. And of course, as we increase climate change, we then get droughts, we then exacerbate the land loss. So it's a ridiculous and dangerous feedback loop.
Oh, wow. I'm guessing there's also contaminated water. Does that play a role in there? Because I would think soil has something to do with water. There's a lot of underground water as well. And if that's contaminated.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because about 31% of our watershed area in the world is covered by forests. So water is also linked to our loss of land. And when we have deforestation, we can actually get contaminated water, because there's a few things here. One, healthy forests act as a filter to keep out pollution in our water. So when you have erosion, the roots that anchor the soil against erosion, I mean, we destroy them, right? So we're going to have erosion. And then the material on the forest floor, it's no longer there to absorb nutrients and sediments that would hold pollutants. So that stuff runs off into our waterways. Not good. The other thing is the forest actually helps control the water cycle. So then it goes beyond even just water quality to water resource, like having enough water, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're no longer having like branches and roots and canopies storing water vapor, and then rainfall gets messed up. And finally, the forest is actually a natural water filter. This was really cool. In New York, they conserved forest and landscape in the Catskills to save on water filtration. So they invested $1.5 billion to protect 1 million acres of what is watershed forest. And 1.5 billion sounds like a lot, but then they saved roughly $68 billion on the cost of building a water filtration plant.
Oh, wow.
Like an additional one. So
yeah. And that's what we keep saying, right? Like the whole thing that these are the costs that people will incur later on if they don't move towards green changes, because these are costs that are coming our way. We just we're putting them off.
Exactly.
I'm pretty impressed.
Mm-hmm. It's something that I guess you wouldn't think about when you're talking about water resource, but it is important. Which brings us to one of our greatest sources of land on Earth, despite how we draw it on the map, the continent of Africa. It is one of the most diverse continents for land use because you have everything from like cropland, forest, grassland, wetland, Sahara, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. In addition to like human beings, right? Mm-hmm. And according to the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO, nearly 4 million hectares of African forests are cut down each year, which is double the speed of the world's deforestation average. And we're including like the Borneo and the Amazon in here. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're cutting Africa down at double the speed, which is fantastic.
I mean, are we surprised at all?
Sadly not. Coverage-wise, 26% of the land in Africa is classified as forest, which is a lot because it's not a small continent, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's home to nearly 43 billion trees, most of which are actually found in South Africa, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. But we're not talking about any of those countries today. And this is a random fact, but it turns out that the country on Earth that is having its forest destroyed the quickest is Nigeria. I found that out today.
Oh, wow.
I cannot. Like, my country stresses me out.
Hey, you know what? This is how people in Pakistan look at things. They're like, hey, at least we're leading in something.
Right. You know, we have to lead in something. Between Nigeria and America, and I will never know peace. I will never know peace.
That's what I say about Pakistan and the U.S. So,
well, like we said earlier, you know, a lot of this land loss is due to agriculture. And so when you look at Africa, where the continent of Africa, by the way, I'm speaking in general, where like our biggest cash crops are cocoa, we have all this oil, not to mention 24% of the world's palm oil comes from that continent. And we've talked about palm oil on the show before when we did that Borneo episode.
Yeah. I always thought that's East Asia, Indonesia,
yeah,
to be specific.
Yeah, a lot comes from Indonesia, but one of the first things, even this goes back as far as slave trade, one of the first issues that we had in the region of Nigeria I'm from is when they abolished quote-unquote slavery, they then moved to palm oil trade. It was already there, but it got like really bad. So the region of the Niger Delta, apart from all its issues with oil and stuff, is actually ravaged for palm trees. So it's actually, yeah. It's a problem, but what else can we say? Some other stuff is, of course, like illegal logging, which we're about to get into, and pollution from burning fuels. And of course, Africa, the African continent, is seeing like a huge population growth while the rest of the world is seeing decline. So those people are going to need places to live, and those people are going to need resources. It will become an issue if, you know, other people keep taking the resources they should have. Which brings us to today's topic in the Congo. So, Adjoa, I sent you a picture It shows like the state of the world's largest tropical rainforest in 2020. And I just wanted you to take a look and see. It shows the place with the most cover. It shows the places with the most loss. What are their top two?
Well, the one with the most cover is Amazon and the Congo, obviously. But the one with the most loss is also Amazon and the Congo.
I know. Isn't that? I was like, it's a huge decline. It's been going down, going down, going down. And we did post good news about the Amazon on our social media. So if you want to know what it is, go check it out there. I'm not telling you. But speaking of the Congo, it's the river itself, right, is the Earth's second largest river by volume.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it covers 3.7 million square kilometers, which is 1.4 million square miles. And it's the Congo Basin. A lot of it is covered by tropical rainforests and swamps. Well, more of it used to be, but we'll find out why it's not that way anymore. And it is the world's second largest rainforest. It covers 6 to 9 countries, depending on you ask. Technically, it stretches into 9 countries, but the actual river and the forest is in 6. And of course, most of it is in the Congo. And so in this region, of course, one of the biggest drivers of deforestation is logging. And not just any logging, illegal logging. I have to say that.
In my opinion, all logging is illegal logging if the people aren't getting it.
You know what? That is an angle that I think we should see things that way. You make a fantastic point. Of course, people also use the area for agriculture besides the commercial stuff. And a lot of the fuel comes from these woods, okay, for the indigenous people to the area. And of course, it must be said, mining. We'll get into that. I'm so sick of mining. The logging has led to a situation where there's a lot of commercial hunting now, and there's a poaching epidemic in the DRC actually, and in other areas of the Congo Basin, which has led to a 60% drop in elephant population in that area in less than a decade. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, David Attenborough would be so disappointed, guys.
We're always talking about the fucking pandas. What about the elephants?
Honestly, yeah. I mean, remember when the whole world rallied around these elephants in China to get them back? That's what we need to start doing again.
No, they're not going to do that because what would they hunt? Ajwa, what would they hunt if we started protecting more African wildlife?
All right, and then how will people get ivory floors?
Exactly.
But what's interesting to me is, like you said, the continent has a significant amount of resources like gold, oil, minerals, even the semiconductors for our phones. So, how has this impacted the loss of forests alongside this illegal logging? I'm pretty sure there's a lot other stuff that happens that leads to this.
It has been a problem. Like you said, it does have a lot of resources. The continent is home to 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 40% of the world's gold, still after it has been depleted, and up to 90% of the chromium and platinum, which is why it's such an ideal hub for manufacturing green technologies like batteries and turbines and fuel cells. But it's also what's kind of destroying the place because the African continent is fueling our high-tech lifestyles. And so the mining over there is really poorly regulated. Let's get into the rainforest specifically. It's lost 600,000 hectares of primary forest in 2020, which is a 9% increase in deforestation from 2019. In 1 year, 9% increase.
Wow.
Yeah, it just keeps going up and up like that. And that's according to the Global Forest Watch. And of course, oil. We have to talk about oil because the Congo also has peatlands in its more like mangrove-ish adjacent areas. And these peatlands, we have realized they have a lot of oil. So there's been a lot of debate and a lot of struggle around oil in the region, adding to the already frustrated area from mining and logging. A recent report from February 28th of this year that was done by the NGO Global Witness suggests that the surging interest in the area's oil is overshadowing efforts to keep the ecosystem intact, which I don't feel like that's news, but, that's what they said. And then There is another thing besides the industrial stuff and the agriculture that we have to mention. And I know it's an uncomfortable topic, but you guys, the effects of colonization still affect areas like the Manga Bay. They still affect a lot of the world. But let's talk about how we got there. So by the end of the 19th century, French colonizers in North and West Africa banned rural communities from practicing a lot of their old subsistence farming methods.
Of course they did.
Right. You know, us savages, quote unquote, were doing it wrong and destroying stuff. But it's so crazy because then they...
let the white people show you how to eat.
Oh, man. They ended up getting so much resources from their farming. Let's put it like that. And of course, that led to environmental degradation. Mm-hmm. You also had people being forced to chop down forests so that there were cotton plantations. I know that some of our listeners, well, a lot of our listeners come from the US and people don't realize this, but just like in the Caribbean where they were forced to farm sugarcane and other crops, in Africa, we were forced to farm our own land for resources. In fact, Nigeria, technically became Nigeria because it started as a business company. And I'm not even kidding you. It was a British company. I'm not even joking. It's not like there was a company in Nigeria. Like, it was a company and they were like, oh, what if we just kind of put all this together? I think we'd make more money. And then they were like, bet. But yeah. So, you know who came up with the term deforestation?
French?
Yeah, it was the French. It was a French colonial forester. They were like, you guys are really destroying this area, and there's so many deserts being created. I think it's you guys' fault, and this is what we're gonna call that from now on. So it's just been a real struggle, and the Congo is still fighting this sort of injustice today. So we might joke a little bit, but on the show we have to use humor to survive, man.
So wait, let me get this straight. French came in, tell them how to...
The Belgians and also
the Belgians came in, told them how to farm because they were doing it wrong.
Mm. So the Belgians started the colonization. The French were also there. And then the French, not just in the Congo, but in the whole region, they were like, you guys, this farming you're doing is not working. And not just the French, to be fair, there were a lot of colonial powers at play too.
Yeah.
And so that's when people stopped farming with our old traditional ways. And of course, that led to larger agricultural yields, but that also led to more deforestation and desertification, which is a gift the French gave us by telling us what we were doing was wrong.
After telling you how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been, obviously this has left a lot of, there's been a significant impact thanks to this. The UN estimated that in 2000, some 1.6 billion people across the world, including a lot of the poorest people, got a lot of their food directly from forests. So you destroy it, or you tell them not to farm how they used to, and obviously you're going to lose food. Even if you argue that local people need these resources for survival, and they do, most of the loss is not due to this kind of small-scale subsistence farming and when they get wood here and there for fuel. It's not. Because about half of all the wood extracted from Africa's forests is used for fuel, right? But then that's just in general over Africa. In the Congo, about 80% of the wood that's taken out is not even going, it's not going to the Congo.
Oh, wow. So wait, so they don't even get to use the wood that's being chopped up on their own lands?
No, it's crazy because sub-Saharan Africa as a region is a net importer of processed wood products. So a lot of our wood leaves the continent and the Congo too, especially. And then we have to import that wood back.
So you have to buy the wood that is being stolen from your land.
I'm laughing because that's how oil works in Nigeria. The crude oil leaves the country and then we import petroleum products.
Refined oil, yeah. I mean, but man, this logging thing, that's what I meant by illegal logging. All logging is illegal if we're not giving it to the people who own the land.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. You're right.
I'm pretty sure they're not getting a decent buck for it.
No, they're not. A lot of these companies are foreign owned. nearly 95% of like all the administrative stuff related to any kind of forest countries in the Congo region, like around that rainforest, they are owned by foreign entities. And of course, when we have corruption and we have greed and we have these artisanal logging permits, indigenous people to the area get them so that they can still cut like small trees for like Congolese nationals for the resources that they need. And so what's happening is the artisanal permits are being awarded to foreign firms. So foreign firms will sometimes, like, it happens one of two ways, either through straight up corruption, right, with certain government officials and things like that, or they get like an intermediary and that person gets the permits. And obviously it's not artisanal because roughly 80% of the logging in the Congo is illegal. And so this approach to permits just makes it hard for you to even track the illegal timber, because when they have these permits and they can prove it's not illegal, when it gets to a European country at customs or whatever, and the country's like, well, where did this come from? They have proof that, oh, no, we definitely had permission to take this, even if they didn't. And then another thing, when you think about the impact, so of course the world needs wood. Like, let's be for real. We need it, right? But this is not the way to get it. If you destroy where you get something from and you never repair it, you're going to run out. That's just how life works. But another thing that is worth noting is that there's a reason that we call these giant rainforests the lungs of the earth. We use them to kind of absorb emissions, right? And the African continent, as a whole continent, as giant as it is, only contributes about 4% in GHG emissions.
Wait, what?
Yeah, exactly. And of any region that suffers from the disasters of climate change, the sub-Saharan African region feels the impact the most. They are held responsible. Not to mention, we've talked about carbon offsetting a lot on this program. A lot of carbon offsetting programs are based in in Asian countries and African countries, right? So companies will be like, hey, we're going to offset whatever we emit here, and they'll start projects in these countries. But I recently found out that it can be a very dangerous thing to do because sometimes they started at the expense of the people who live there. You guys can look up the story of Mount Elgon in Uganda. This Dutch company drove out millions of people from their homes so that they could plant trees and be like, look at us, we're offsetting carbon, which is just fucked up, man.
What?
I know. This was years ago, too.
Wow.
This is from I think this is from the 90s. Yeah. And stuff like this still goes on today.
The audacity.
To displace all those people and then take credit for it. But if the world wants to keep using these South American, Asian, and African countries, especially using, the Amazon or like the rainforest in the Congo as lungs to help us survive and fight climate change, then we have to come up with better ways to take care of these areas.
Yeah, I think we're moving more towards a world of that movie Don't Look Up, where we have gotten to a point where we're just, at this point, just ignoring what's happening, not taking into account that every disaster is so much worse, all these countries. And guess what we have to blame for that, Allah? Can you imagine how many minutes I went without saying capitalism?
I'm so proud of you. I can't believe we made it this far into the episode.
Oh yeah, because you baited me with colonialism, so I was playing around with that.
I try to distract her, you guys, with her shiny C's, capitalism and colonialism. I'm sorry.
My favorite.
Oh my God. But that actually brings me to a good point, because a lot of people debate whether more of this situation is due to corruption or capitalism, right? Because we're going to be honest on the show. We're always honest. We say every part. A lot of local and foreign armed groups have been blamed for furthering the deforestation in the region, and Western countries have even called for sanctions against the individuals from the shadows that fund these groups. We have armed groups that engage in wildlife poaching, illicit exploitation and solicitation, and trade of timber, which is what they use to kind of fund a lot of these disagreements. I'm not going to get into the details of Congolese politics, but if you guys know anything about Rwanda and genocide and the Hutu people when they fled into the Congo, it's kind of just been going on since the 90s and just worsening ever since. And there's an aspect of corruption there when it comes to kind of keeping these turmoils taken care of and trying to avoid, funding war with environmental devastation, and that's not happening very well. So that's why people say, well, are we supposed to blame the external powers and the companies that come here and exploit the place? Or are we going to blame corruption?
I obviously, you know what I vote for, colonialism. Am I right? Tell me I'm right, please.
So you are kind of right, because it's both things, right? This corruption, and this is just a general thing, whenever we talk about corruption in these countries, you have to understand a lot of corruption is driven by these like older imperialist and colonialist ideals that the powers use to make deals with African leaders. And now, instead of them, we have what I like to call quote unquote corporate colonization. So we do need better sanctions in these areas. We need more accountability from the government. And I mean, an example is 5 of the world's largest tech companies were accused in a landmark lawsuit of being complicit in the death of children in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, if you didn't hear me say before, when they were forced to mine cobalt. Can you guess what the 5 companies were?
I don't know, Google, Apple, Microsoft.
So you were pretty close. You said some of them, actually. You didn't miss any. It was Tesla, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Dell. And the only one that responded directly at the time was Dell, to say that they do not tolerate any form of child, forced, or compulsory labor, and that they weren't aware that their suppliers were using these routes to supply. Tesla, Apple, and Google were like,
girl, even before you told me, the one who responded, I knew it could not be one of the big 4. It had to be the poor little Dell.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, in a twist of what I can only refer to as beautiful irony, Microsoft's chief of staff, tech, and corporate responsibility, Michelle Burlington, visited an artisanal cobalt mine in the DRC last year.
What the fuck? Excuse me, what are these artisanal mines? And how can something as huge as mining be artisanal? Like, what is with all this artisanal bullshit? What is this, a French fucking bakery?
Yeah, so I shouldn't laugh because it's actually very messed up. Artisanal mines are a way to avoid hiring and paying workers in safe conditions. So, of course, we need our precious metals, and like we've established, the DRC has tons of them, especially around forest. So they're like these huge open pits, and you have an area where people have been driven out of their homes due to logging, and they've lost their areas. They don't have any way to take care of themselves due to this resource depletion. And so I'm going to send you a picture. Take a look at that picture I just sent you. Do you see it?
Yeah. Oh my God, this looks...
That is an artisanal mine.
Crazy. Mm-hmm. What?
Yep.
What part of this is artist? I mean, the pictures do look like little bread loaves that these people are carrying. So maybe I sound like Marie Antoinette, but...
Let there be cake.
Come on, man up. I feel terrible.
It's sarcasm, you guys. It really, it's a horrible picture. And you can always check our show notes to see in the sources. So these are the areas that people go down to. They just go into these pits. They have to dig the tunnels themselves. There's no supports. So the pits collapse all the time. They get paid pennies on the dollar. So yeah, Microsoft went down there because they're trying to formalize the artisanal mining industry. Because, you know, they're like, well, we can't stop it. So what if we fix it? And the chief of staff, when she, in her report, if you read the report, she sounded so traumatized from seeing it. I think it's very important that people should see what it is our actions are causing. And I think she felt it when she went down there. Mm-hmm. There used to be this mine. The mine that they visited was this mine that was formalized in 2019. And then after COVID, they were like, the formalization disappeared. They said it was due to COVID. But even with that formalization, mind you, there weren't like a lot of safety stuff in place. It was just that the people could negotiate for better hours and better pay. But now even that is gone in that one major artisanal mine. So as of this recording, you guys, I'm sorry. I want to give you guys like really nice news, but regarding artisanal mines, you guys, there's no positive updates. This year, the U.S., aka Biden, actually had this plan that they came up with to address this issue because it is a supply chain issue that is affecting global economy. So, of course, we have to figure out a way to get the cobalt out of there.
These are all these Western companies, so I'm hoping, not guessing. Somebody's doing something about it. Are they?
Okay, so let's talk about some of the recent pledges. We love a good pledge. After COP26 in 2021, President Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC and the former Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, they endorsed an ambitious 10-year agreement to protect the Congo Basin forest. Now, if you have not heard of this before, there's something called the Central African Forest Initiative. We have a lot of initiatives like this in Africa that are like joint partnership things, and they're usually used to protect something or contribute to something or solve something. And in this case, this is the one that's for the forest in Central Africa, because there's a lot of forests there that aren't dead yet. The DRC decided, or they're aiming to cap forest cover loss at its 2014 to 2018 average, which you're probably like, well, is that enough? Look, dude, that's plenty considering how much we have right now. So they're hoping to do that by 2031, and then kind of help deforestation continue to decline. The partnership should also regenerate 8 million hectares of degraded land and forests and place 30% of the national areas under protected status. That is the goal. Now, last year at COP27, the new UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced a 26-nation partnership agreement to conserve woodland ecosystems in general, so forests would fall under that, as one of the best ways to get us on track to 1.5 degrees of warming, which we talk about that on the show so much. Just listen to like some of our episodes. What was that series? I think if you listen to literally anything from episodes 15 through 40, you're going to hear about this 1.5 degrees of warming.
But is this the first of the? I highly doubt this is the first of this sort of agreement. But like, have there been any additional pledges, and has anyone actually paid anything, or have we just seen pledges around the world?
So I found some sort of agreement or pledge from 2015, 2016, 2019, 2021, and 2022 while researching for this episode. Here's the thing. This new agreement, the one from last year, there's no discussion of funding for all types of forests specifically, but it just focuses on something called healthy forests, which is basically saying that the forests we have right now we should preserve, but doesn't really specifically target degraded forests. So, I mean, they could argue that they're talking about all of them, but the language does not say that. There was no provision for protecting waterlogged forests either, or peatlands like the kind you would find in the rainforest. In addition, funding for the coffee agreement that we just talked about is behind schedule, and of course the program is underfunded. I mean, there is no government anywhere in this world that does not love to underfund an environmental initiative. And as far as anyone who had actually paid anything, I found Gabon. They are the first and currently, as far as I know, the only country to get any actual funds paid out by coffee, because they met a deforestation goal in 2021. And the country that was responsible for paying out a pledge was Norway. They paid $1.5 million. So I'm going to give Norway their props. We don't talk about Norway a lot on the show, but maybe we should.
I mean, yeah.
As far as any other bigger solutions or anything, there is this new Great Green Wall of Africa initiative. So the Great Green Wall of Africa covers a bunch of different countries. It's basically not a line, but just a very long expansion of trees and forests. And there's a plan that was launched in 2007 that is ongoing to plant millions of trees along an 8,000 kilometer corridor in the Sahel. It's supposed to kind of slow desertification and also, help with emissions and things like that. And experts do think that if we keep up with this, that it could help. Now, it's almost at a standstill as of right now, but in 2021, there was, this huge economic boost in the region, so we are hoping for it to kind of pick back up quickly again. So that's the good news I have for you guys on this episode. That is it. I really don't have any more positive vibes to give out. But there is something that has nothing to do with solutions. Adjoa, I tweeted about this last week when I was researching. I almost lost my fucking mind. Okay. This is one of the wildest lawsuits, even for an African country, and the amount of shit we have to deal with. This is still crazy. This Israeli businessman called Dan Gertler, and I don't say his nationality so you guys can be dicks. I say it to show how it's usually foreign nationals. It's almost always foreign nationals. But this guy, Dan Gertler, I'm going to say his name as much as possible, he filed a lawsuit against Congo's leading anti-corruption coalition, Le Congo n'est pas à vendre. I'm not going to say that again. He filed it against these people. Let's say Congo is not for sale, the CNPAV, in March of this year. It targeted their spokesperson, Jean-Claude Mputu, and his employer, Resource Matters, which is a Belgian civil society group, and the claim was that they defamed him. The lawsuit centers around an interview that Mputu gave to a news outlet and the amount of money, where he was talking about the amount of money that Gertler's company has earned in the DRC and talking about how the man has earned his money. And after the lawsuit, the CNPAV even published information to back up its claim. But Gertler was like, nope, defamation. And he's currently seeking, wait for it, 1 million real life euros in damages. And as if that wasn't crazy enough, this led me down a rabbit hole when I realized that this man has filed tons of lawsuits in the past 2 years against anti-corruption activists, whistleblowers, journalists, and civil society groups. Have you ever heard anything so insane?
I mean, but I'm honestly curious, is this case in Congo? Because like one party is Israeli and the other one that they're suing is Belgian based. Also, like what happened to these lawsuits? Like what was the result?
All right, here's some more bad news. First off, last year, those 2 whistleblowers that he sued, they were sentenced to death in absentia. They couldn't even find them. They just sentenced them to death. Apparently, the whistleblowers were the people who were at fault here.
Wait, what?
Yeah. That's why we talk about like the lack of regulation and the lack of oversight and like the corruption that comes into play sometimes. And the cases in the Congo, that's why he can do stuff like this. And the CMPAV is actually associated with the Belgian civil society as one of its employers. So, you know, they kind of work with them and employ these people and pay them to do the work that they do, which this is, considering everything that Belgium did to cause the issues in the Congo, I always like when, you know, in some way, in some small form, they are paying some kind of reparation. So the civil society is doing a good job. I guess that's another piece of good news, you guys. There you go.
Yay.
But the crazy thing is, we don't have an update on this lawsuit, but I think I know how it might end because, you know, I told you this man has been suing anybody who is trying to stop him left and right. Not even stop him, just call him out.
Yeah.
There was a settlement last year between him and the authorities in the DRC. The settlement said that Dan Gertler will sell back some of his oil and mining assets to the Congolese state. But the company will retain the right to collect valuable royalty streams on 3, not 1, not 2, 3 copper cobalt mines, and we've discussed the conditions in these mines, for the next 15 years. The settlement also shields Gertler and his network from any future judicial investigations in the DRC. The guy wrote a letter this year to the rights groups, and because he was asking for the DRC to negotiate with the US to loosen the sanctions against him. And in the letter, and then the rights groups were like, what the hell, don't do that. So he wrote a public letter to them. And in the letter, I shit you not, this is a direct quote. He said that these sanctions from the US had been crippling his business and that he had been punished enough.
Is he suing more people for that?
I don't know. I just wanted to let you guys know about this crazy lawsuit because we always do a little bit of a lawsuit or something and usually it's against the bad guys, but here we are. First time for everything. What?
I mean, yeah, I know like we've talked about this entire episode about desertification and land degradation. And since we are still living in a perpetually increasing population, it also means that we need a lot more land to feed these people. But thanks to climate change, a lot of this land is becoming infertile. So do you think that some of this deforestation, and this is a heavy loaded question, but Do you think that some of this deforestation is justified, that it is needed to provide food for the larger population? Because, I always talk about saving the planet for people, but at what cost? Because, do you think we're just pushing humanity towards another crisis if we keep destroying the planet to make even more space for our own selves?
This is a loaded question, and it's one I think requires nuance. I'm going to be honest, I think to a degree we do need these resources, right? It's a matter of balance, taking and replenishing. It's like when we take water from the ground, we should recharge an aquifer. I know I love that example, but it's a great example. Plant the trees after you take the logs so that in 50 years, 100 years, there's some other trees there. And when it comes to the materials, especially with the mining, we've had material research and engineering come so far that there are a lot of alternatives to just wood, right? Besides plastic, y'all. And so we can use those to augment as well. The problem is, apart from the fact that, I like a nice wood finish, I'm not gonna lie. And the US is currently the largest producer of timber in the world. So, I live here. I don't want it to be destroyed. I don't want anywhere to be destroyed. But we need some of these resources. We just need to balance it out. And then there's the issue of the fact that a lot of these materials, like the newer materials that could actually help augment the use of just wood, they don't reach the rural areas where we take this shit from, okay? We are not sending back the processed materials to a lot of the areas that we are taking the stuff from. And so we need to think about that so that people can at least continue their small scale logging and farming. That stuff is important for their existence.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. And thank you for actually answering this very loaded question. What do you guys think? What is more important or takes priority when it comes to dealing with these issues? Please let us know on any of our social media. You can also email us at planetpolicypals@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Speaking of all of that, one really great organization that is actually working towards fixing all this deforestation and degradation is the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network International, which is a solutions-based organization that is established to engage women worldwide in policy advocacy, on-the-ground projects, trainings, and movement building for global climate justice. And they're basically called Women for Forests.
Support.
These are the ladies that we should all be supporting. Anyway, that is our show. Please check out our website, planetpolicypals.com, for updates. Email us, leave a voicemail, rate, and review us. Follow us on Twitter at Planet Policy Pal, Instagram at Planet Policy Pals, and like our Facebook page. This show is created, written, and edited by us. The main writer for this episode was Alaibo Seminatari, with additional writing by Ajwa Zahid. In addition, we utilized multiple sources from researchers, science journalists, and government agencies as part of research for this show, which are all available in the show notes or on our website. Sources from this episode include the New York Times, University of Columbia News, National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, Human Rights Watch, Water Resources Institute, World Health Organization, International Union for Conservation of Nature, World Resource Institute, Earth.org, Mongabay Rainforest.org, African Wildlife Foundation, Al Jazeera News, and the African Renewal News. Wow, Ala really did list all of them. I would have just said it. Anyway, thank you for always supporting us. We hope you learned something new, buy less new technology, and until next time,
Keep learning, pals.